Sure.
So
Okay.
hi, everybody. Welcome. Steve Cady here at Bowling Green State University and with All Things Change at Nexus for Change. And we have our featured speaker today, which is more of a conversational experience that we're going to have. I'm really excited, Yeshim, that you're here with us. Thank you for making the time. We have people from all over the world here. We have students from our doctoral program and maybe our master's program as well at Bowling Green State University, as well as at the Free University of Amsterdam as well. And part of our experience is we go to Europe and we do work at each in Amsterdam, London, and Paris. And one of our portions of our learning experience is going to be looking at the Paris Agreement, global change, and Yeshim and I met at Tavistock and we talked a little bit about this, and she's helping us with that experience and that portion of the trip, which will be the Paris portion. And she's going to today share a little bit about her approach to conflict, looking at comparative learning, and really help set the stage for our students that are here to understand the model that will be used, because we'll be meeting 2 more times after this just with our doctoral students to look at sharing their research and learning and start to building an international learning exchange with them online before we go over to Europe. So it's really a pleasure to have you, Yeshim, have you here. And thank you for making the time today.
Thank you. Thank you, Steve. Well, good morning to you, everyone joining from the US and anyone. I'm in London. I'm based in London. Greetings from London to all of you. So good afternoon to people who are joining from my part of the world.
Yep.
It's really a pleasure to join you at All Things Change podcast today.
Yes, thank you.
Good to be here.
Yeah, and so to start this off, Yeshim, I wanted to get to know you a little bit and help us get to know you a little bit, to talk about if you could reflect on a time when you felt you mattered in your work, the work that you do in the world, and the work you do around conflict. Could you share with us a story where you of a moment where you felt you mattered in doing this work?
I don't know which one to share. There are many. So my specialism and my passion is to make people talk. And I know some of the reasons, but some of the reasons why I so feel passionate about, I don't know, that comes from somewhere else, and it doesn't really matter, but what matters is that it's there. So I have one of the projects that I feel most proud of with me and my team, not just me, is that a few years ago we brought 2 sides of a conflict in an island called Cyprus. And the aim of it was to bring people together with particularly polarized views. And it took us we were invited there, and it took us 18 months to actually prepare them, to put them in the same room. They wouldn't sit in the same room before then. And they wouldn't travel on the same plane. Anyway, fast forward 18 months later, we did sit together. It was a very difficult. We took them to another island because they couldn't sit in the same room in their own island. They couldn't agree at a place, so we took them somewhere else. And we sat there together and we had very intensive 3-4 days together, a lot of emotions. But in the end, they decided that they were going to keep talking every month, which still continues. So again, fast forward to very recently, I received an email from one of the people who were there, and he is someone who is very extreme in his views, and he was one of the most resistant people. And he gave me a ring and we went for coffee to say, so how are you, to catch up. And he actually said to me that at a particular dinner, one of those times, that I intentionally, without them knowing, made them sit together at the dinner, and with someone from the other side. equally extreme views. And he got very upset with me that I did that first, but then, they sat down, and he told me many years later, recently, that he says, I still do not agree with what my counterpart says. He says, I still get furious about some of the things he says, but we go for coffee together from time to time. And he said, if you haven't made us sort of sit together, it might not have happened. And that was a time when I thought I made a difference, my team made a difference. And for me, afterwards, so there was a lot of achievements of the project, but human interaction at this level is what touches me most. So that's one example.
Yeah. Could you just share just a little bit before we jump into some of your content? What were some of the things that you did to get them to be willing to sit down? What were the little things you did that got them to sit down at the table?
Well, actually, part of this, what I'm going to say today, is about that. And it is about it needs intensive preparation. First of all, it needs an invitation. You can't force peace. You can't force agreement on people. People will need to invite you in. So we're professionals who do these things. I'm trained in this. I have a personal experience too, but I'm trained in this. And so first of all, we went there by invitation. And I don't know if if you're familiar with the term shuttle diplomacy, but it takes about, for that particular case, it took us 18 months to speak between two sides, going from one side to another, to speak and understand and each other. And basically, they needed to agree on what was going to be discussed, where was going to be discussed, how was it going to be discussed, every single thing to the minute detail before we put them together. So there are, and if you allow me to get to, the comparative learning is somewhere that this is my own, the method that I love most. So I will be telling most about it. But we brought them examples from other places where they could hear the heartaches from the first hand. They could understand dynamics at other contexts firsthand, which broke the ice and the fury.
Yeah. And one last question is, can you tell me about the emotions that you experienced personally as you think about what happened and he told you? I would not have been having more conversations and coffee with that person. And in that moment, you felt you mattered. What were the emotions? What came up for you about your reason for being here on this planet?
Well, that is my life's perfect purpose. Doing this job is my calling. I changed careers about 15 years ago to be trained in this. And I come from a very broken family myself in terms of peace building and ethnic cleansing. Both sides of my mom and dad, they come from different places, and they were both subject to ethnic cleansing at different levels. And then many years later, I adopted a child without knowing that her birth parents were also coming from ethnic cleansing. And it's amazing that universe somehow put us together. And for me, I wanted to stop. I was brought up with so much prejudice, so much racism, hatred, so much of it. I wanted to break that. I wanted that to end with me and not further down the line to my own child. And what did I feel when he told me that? It was almost like everything stopped. I was very present. I was very present and in harmony with the world at that moment, because it's a moment where I realized that there are big things hidden in the small things.
Yeah. Thank you. Thanks for sharing. I'm so grateful for you. Thank you for being here, and thanks for doing the work you do in the world. Just know that it's important and it's appreciated. So as we move to you sharing your slides or getting into the start of yours, I'd like to invite everybody here to freely use the chat as a conversational space to say hi, to ask questions. Teo, myself, and Lisa will be watching that. Thank you, Lisa and Teo, for being producers for today's event. they'll be watching that, and they might bring some question in or kind of bring something up in as appropriate. But also just say hi and have a conversation there. And as resources, what you also will notice is Teo will be putting resources, at least they'll be putting links in for things that might be referenced that you all want to know about. If someone brings up a great book or a resource or a location or an organization or a website, they'll be putting the links in for you. So be watching that. You'll want to copy and paste that in as well later, copy that chat, because you'll find there's lots of very helpful information in there. So Yeshim, you want to bring up did you want to start with your slides? You want to go ahead and, is that where you were going to start with?
Yes, yes,
Yeah,
yes.
okay, yeah, you can go ahead and bring those up now.
Sure.
And you all you'll see she'll bring those up in just a second. We're going to have some breakout groups. You're going to be going, if you're able to open your video up, it really helps Yeshim to feel connected and us all to feel connected with each other. If you're able to, please allow your video to be running so we're all connected here. And we'll go ahead. Are you able to? Are you
sure.
doing okay there? Yeah. So
can you see it?
Yes. Yeah. Thanks. So yeah, it's perfect. We can see it very well. So thanks. And Yeshim, I'll turn it over to you to take us on our journey with you today.
Thank you. Thank you. That's wonderful. Thank you. So it's really, as it is, really pleasure to be here. So today I would like to share some thoughts about why conflict is good for us. You've heard a little bit of my story, and I really believe that conflict is good for all of us, and it has many benefits, but yet it's perceived negatively. And why is it that? And I'd like to share some thoughts on this, and I'd also like to learn from you. So as Steve said, please raise your hands, put things in the chat. I will try to, when I'm speaking, I'll try to look at the chat function as well. Feel free to do that. So here, this is, I mentioned to you a little bit about my background, but this is my street where I used to live. This is many, many years before I qualified as a conflict management practitioner. So I don't know if you can see my cursor. Steve, can you see my cursor when I move it like that?
Yes, we can.
Super, thank you. So I just wanted to just tell you about a story of broken barrels. So these are the barrels. I used to live in this street. And I was a young professional. I didn't really understand much about life at the time. And so this street used to be a long street, which you can't really see. And this is again in Cyprus, the island that I mentioned just briefly. This is where Cyprus is here. So it's just within kind of east of Europe, below Turkey, sort of here. So Cyprus is divided into two, and at that time when I took this picture, there was no crossover at all. And this shed here, this sort of piece of greenery here, is where I used to live. This is my garden, and this street was cut in half. And I used to, obviously my work was the other way, not that way, and there was absolutely no connection between these two sides. And one day I walked towards these barrels and I saw this little hole, which I took a picture here. And you can't really see it, but when I put my nose inside of it, I could actually see really, really at the sort of very far people walking around. And so there was, this is an island divided by two, and it is in between where the division is. It's very much like Berlin side division. And except that there are two parallel walls, and in between United Nations peace forces still has offices there. Now you can go from one side to another with a lot of strict control, but at the time you could absolutely not cross from here to another shop in the other side of the island, which would be, I don't know, 100 meters away. If you wanted to do that, you had to fly somewhere else and then land the other side of the island. So anyway, just wanted to say this is what where those seeds of what I want to do in life were sown, because I realized that hole there, what I was seeing, the people I was seeing through this hole, was exactly what some real life experiences were like. That there were some people in workplaces, in my family, in other people, that there were sometimes visible and sometimes invisible walls. But if you put closely enough your nose into it to find a little hole, there's always a way through it. So this is where the seeds were sown. So I will just sort of stop share for 1 second. And so conflict is really natural. For me, how I see life is conflict is a very natural and normal feature of our relationships between individuals, between families, within organizations. So wherever there's human interaction, there is always room for conflict. It's conflict is as natural as love, as sadness, as other loving interactions. It's a part of interaction. So why is conflict often regarded as a negative concept? I was always interested in that. So conflict, in my experience, conflict has helped me resolve issues, improve my communication, deepen connections, and if handled well, it created better dynamics for me in my life, in all sorts of walks of life. Yet I know that I personally I have avoided, not so much these days, and many people around me, we avoid and resist conflict until all other routes are exhausted. And sometimes even after that, we avoid it. Sometimes we avoid conflict at the expense of our own interest. We prefer to walk away from the possibilities, from potentially beneficial relationships, connections and opportunities, just so we don't get into the conflict. So why do we avoid it in this extent? So I'm just going to share again and show you a couple of, oops, what happened? Yeah. So I'm going to share again. If I show you these, if I show anyone these pictures and say, which one do you associate conflict with? Anyone? Is there anyone who would associate conflict with the one picture on the left? Speak now or hold your...
Yeah, I think in the chat you can also share which ones.
Yeah,
when I look at it, I know where you're going, right? There's a sense that you're gonna, it's all, but just looking at it, conflict looks like the middle looks like that. The left doesn't look like conflict. It looks like, cooperation and getting along and connecting, that kind of thing.
Yes, absolutely. And again, if I move to this one, I would say similar things, because in this one as well, people are holding hand. Oh, is my video off?
No, we
not
see
anymore.
We see your screen. We see your screen.
So I guess the same here. I can see that some people wrote things. I am sorry. That's because loss hurts more than gain feels good. Okay, that's interesting, because that means we're actually connecting conflict with loss. So I would actually go further than this. And I would say that my answer to this is because we associate conflict with loss, violence, hurt, broken relationships, and heartaches. But I believe that violence and all of these losses and broken relationships are only one type of outcome. So I will share you, this is, I try to put this in a, so if we think that the conflict is here, I argue that a well-handled conflict will lead to this, and a badly handled conflict will lead to barbed wires. Yet we always associate the latter with conflict. So I thought a lot about why, and what I will do is I will actually talk about what I mean by well-handled conflict is. So until I keep thinking, why is it that we always associate that? So until recently, you may have other ideas about this, but this is what I think. Until recently, I would say until the end of the Second World War, we haven't heard much about the concept of peace. We talked always about either wars, battles, or winning versus losing, and that was the discourse we understood life. We see life. This was the lens through which we see life. So humanity. Sorry, I think there's someone. Did you want to say something to me, or is it on me?
That's okay. You're fine. Keep going. It's okay.
So humanity saw winning, but not peace, as the ultimate gain. You know, if we won, we were grateful, and peace was not talked about. We won or we lost. And the word conflict only featured to describe a disagreement. We didn't think about that. So, and also, I don't know how it is in state, but in many countries I looked at, including this one that I live in, if you look at history textbook for schools, you could easily see that we learn much about wars, but we don't learn about Mahatma Gandhi, Martin Luther King, and a few others who talked about what peace means and importance of using peaceful means to achieve our goals. So instead, we teach our children much more about people who won the battles and how we were victorious and how we were winners and there were losers. How we were the ones who got out of it with victory. So putting the importance on winning and losing in school, I think also reflected at home, at work, and in daily life. But at the end of the Second World War, with the formation of the United Nations, is when we started talking more about the concept of peace and concept of conflict differently. So, but at that time, this concept mostly featured under the umbrella of international diplomacy. Then in 1960s, I'll just very brief, one more paragraph of history and I'll stop. Around 1960s, a Norwegian sociologist called Johan Galtung. If you don't know him, I really recommend. He's one of my heroes, Johan Galtung. In fact, I can again share.
Teo will do that for you. He'll put a link in there for people as well.
Okay. Here, this is Johan Galtung. In 1980, and he defined conflict as, it says, it's on the screen, it says a conflict is a relationship between parties who have or believe they have incompatible interests or goals, but it doesn't mean that this incompatibility has to end up in violence. So far, anyone who want to share anything, any questions?
Well, I think we can do.
I ask you a question.
Yeah. No, I think right now, what in the chat? Let's do a little chatterfall for Yeshim to get a sense of what has what's your initial reaction? What's the one thing that's sitting with you as you listen? What's the concept, the phrase, the thing? And don't hit enter. Just type it into the chat in 15 seconds. Just a quick, what's a word, a phrase, something that comes to you right now? And, you know, Yeshim, as I was listening to you talk, I'll say something here. What you said about when you come in, you have conflict, and then you have there's two paths, handled well and not handled well. And you're saying that people come in with the mindset of the picture of not handled well. So in your work, do you find that it's sort of the, you know, it's a self-fulfilling prophecy, so to speak, that people are coming in expecting that. So that's where it goes. Is how people come into how people view conflict sets them up. And how often does that mindset coming in actually really matter? And go ahead, hit enter, everybody. Boom.
Amazing. Oh, I love it. So nice. Oh, amazing answers. So, okay. So, yes, absolutely. I would say 80-90% of the time, people that I work with come with that mindset, which is why when we do our work, we don't use often the word conflict. We actually use other words. So conflict and peace are very loaded words. And we don't really have to use them. It doesn't matter what we want actually to people to talk to each other.
Right. Yeah. So what I notice with people who do this work well is framing framing is the language, the invitation, how they're invited in, or what are some of the key words or phrases that you use that might help people shift their mindset? What are those words that you use?
Well, first of all, to give the agency to people, one of the first things we do, you asked me how we bring people together. One of the first things we do is, before putting them together, we agree on a terminology. So there are certain things that touches people. For example, again, going back to the Cyprus example, there is an event in 1974 that happened. Doesn't matter what it is, I can tell you more, but what I want to say is one part of the island calls that event a peace operation, and the other party calls it an invasion. So, sometimes they are so polarized and they're going to try to talk to each other. Now, I cannot mention reiterate the importance of why we talk. We don't talk to become amazingly good friends. Why we don't talk to hug each other and be happily ever lived after. It's not about that. It's about very, very small things. For example, in this very project that I mentioned, we started talking about roaming, phone roaming, because there was the business people wanted to get together to talk about, basically, when you go from one part of the island to the other, there was doing a lot of roaming charges. So they wanted to get together to talk about a roaming agreement, but they couldn't do it on their own. So they called us, and we've actually helped them talk to each other. So the terminology, first of all, they define it. The second thing is we talk about, we don't have enough time here, but there is something called nonviolent communication. I don't know, some of you may be familiar. So
we have a chapter on that in the library, which we can share.
Yes, somebody wrote it. Thank you, Marshall Rosenberg. Indeed. So it's about talking from I language, I, rather than you did this, you did that. So I feel it this way, I perceive it this way. So, but that's just one example of it. And there's a kind of all terminology and all attitude to go with it. But if you put people together before they agree, it's likely that you're actually making conflict worse.
Great. So let's keep going, because we want to hear some. Yeah, I think hearing some of your framework, and as we watch our time, I think sharing some of that, and you can address anything you want, obviously, but I do want them to see some of your frameworks as well.
That's my next bit anyway. So I just want to talk a bit about. So am I sharing? No, it's not. Let me just share. So very quickly, I want to say, what is a well-handled conflict? In fact, there is a question about that. What do you mean by that? So a well-handled conflict is where it is well mapped. So we know who the actors are, how the interaction is between them, what the issues are, and it takes so much desk work before actually going to start even interacting with them. And what the current narratives are. Everybody has a different narratives. Is it invasion or a peace operation? Or do we actually listen to both rather than deciding which party is right? So there's so much listening. A well-handled conflict seeks sustainability. So we go into a country with, as professionals, and we can't just do 1 month worth of something and then leave to the rest. No, it actually needs, it needs to be sustainable. It needs to well mapped ahead. It is, so it's a kind of preparation is very, very important. It rests on mandate as in it needs to be, there needs to be willing from both sides for this to happen. Unfortunately, there's a lot of interaction from professionals going into places trying to tell them that they need to talk. That never will work. We always go by invitation, and it has to be engaging. It's about engagement. So that's what I mean by well-handled conflict. And this even actually applies to family relationships too, without understanding exactly what the issue is, without looking at sustainable solutions, without willingness from both sides, without building relationships and trust, and without engaging, this is actually for all parties.
So Yeshim, if you could go back to that, I just want to look at that list here. So as I look at that list, one of the things I notice is the result. The end result is it builds relationships and trust. So that's at the end. And sustainability. There's an intention of sustainability, but the result is also sustainability. And what you're saying is that in the beginning, at the front end, you have to make sure you map it out. There's this whole notion of plan to plan the planning thing, right? Plan to plan, right? And this notion of a lot of the upfront work, and then another level of planning, and then another level of planning the future, right? So there's this notion of intentionally designing and mapping out way early in the front, and then again, and then again. I'm hearing you talk about this mandate. So is a mandate a precursor to even getting started? Is that the very first thing that has to be in place?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, very first thing is an invitation. If there's going to be a professional, as professionals, even if it's going to be a family mediation, international mediation, as professionals, we absolutely 100% need to go on a mandate. Yes. And
the mandate can come from both parties. One party is say a little bit more about that mandate.
Ideally both parties, but sometimes it's only from one party, in which case then we actually talk to the other party to say, would you like to engage with this? And if it's a no, we don't have to walk away straight away. It might be a few visits, it might be a lot of communication, conversation, but at the end of all of that, if the answer is still no, we can't get involved. No.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. So if we go back, what I was showing earlier on here is that that's what I mean by a well-handled conflict can lead to this. Sometimes not, but if it's well-handled, a lot of the time it does. So what I now want to talk to you about is an effective method for trust building, and which is what Steve, you asked me to concentrate a little bit. This is one of my specialism, my passion. I'll just stop sharing for 1 minute. So this is a particular method. I want to talk about a particular method. Many years ago, when I was adopting with my ex-husband, with my daughter, she's 16 now, she was 1 year old. And we went to a week after week parenting, how to parent adopted children and all of that, a lot of courses. And it was really useful, very well delivered. Now ask me 14 years after, what do I remember? Well, not much, right? So it's 6 weeks of course, not much remembering. As opposed to, I went to a party once and someone said to me, there is a woman there, another woman who has an adopted child. Do you want to talk to her? So I said, yes. So she came and we talked only half an hour. I remember almost every word that she said because it came from her own heart, from her own experience, from own successes, failures, and all of it. And that really hit me. This is many years ago. So the particular peace building method, people use peace building methods in all sorts of ways. The one that we use, which is my own specialism, which I'm really passionate about, is called comparative learning, where we go as professionals, but actually people who are in actual conflict learn from others who have been through it and who came out of it. So I will share again my screen to show you what I mean by that. It's so the standard way of doing it is in the left-hand side. So conflicting party 1 and conflicting party 2 has a mediator or a facilitator or whoever it is that is helping them to talk, and they talk to the mediator and through the mediator. So these two sets of arrows presents that. The one that the comparative learning method that I'm talking about is very, very simple. It's a bit different, very simple. So the same conflicting parties, the orange and yellow, sitting and having a lot of disagreements between them. And the facilitator has a more at the background role. It's just, they just hold the safe space. They're the one who prepare everyone and facilitate. But then they bring experienced parties, the two green parties, who used to have, who has been through this problem and got over it. And there's a very simple training you can give them, and they are the ones. So basically, the conflicting parties are learning from the experienced party. So this was used, first of all, maybe not first of all, but the big one, the first time it really kind of blossomed was, it was used from South Africa, in South Africa. So Nelson Mandela took office in 1994. When that happened in Northern Ireland, I don't know if you are, Northern Ireland is an island. This is United Kingdom, Africa, and Northern Ireland is a part of Ireland, and there has been a lot of conflict there. And many, many decades later, they couldn't agree on anything. And what Mandela did was, there's been so many high-profile facilitators trying to make them talk, they couldn't. But what Mandela did was, Mandela invited both parties to South Africa and said to them, guys, you don't have to talk about your own problem, your own issue. I'm just going to tell you how I used to hate. This is my counterpart, F.W. de Klerk. This is me. We used to hate. We couldn't even look into each other's eyes. We couldn't shake hands. Now I still have disagreements, but I can work with this person now. And this is our story. This is where we fail. This is what we did. And this is what we learned. And so this is, I had this person here is so the Nelson Mandela, these are the two different parties, pictures of Nelson Mandela you're probably recognizing. And this person here called Jeffrey Donaldson, who was in the Mandela's committee, I had absolute privilege to be coached by him. So he coached me about how they trained, and we implemented this in Cyprus. So what we did was we used a Northern Irish example in Cyprus. Rather than talking their problems together, they listened to Northern Irish people, and before my very eyes, the ice broke and melted so much faster. Are they amazing friends? No. There are the end of disagreements? No. But you know what? They still sit together every month in a room to talk. So it is a very, very effective method. Steve, shall we again pause maybe? Would you like to ask a question, or is there anyone, any comments?
I think what we could do is, if you like, we could take a minute and have people just go meet someone else and do a little sharing, and then we'll come back. We'll just take let's take 3-4 minutes to just go meet someone else. And Lisa, are you able to have, and everybody that's here will need you to be able to chat, but just go in and briefly just say, what's your reaction to what you're hearing, and what's a question that's coming up for you? And let's take 3 or 4 minutes to do that and meet somebody. So up is going to pop a invitation to jump into a room, and once you go, say hi briefly and just say, what's your reaction? What's a question that's coming up for you? So if we could go ahead and launch that now, that'd be great. I'm going to pause the recording. Let me keep the recording going. So Yeshim, so how are you right now, as we sit here with what you shared, what would be the one thing, if you were to share with us one thing and say, okay, what's our takeaway we need to take right now? What is the one thing that you still need to share with us to make sure that we be mindful of as we go forward?
Well, I would be really interested in to know if people relate to this, if they had any experiences in their own. I mean, for me, the biggest thing to take out of from all of this is not about international peace building. This is about family feuds. This is about big this model can apply to organizations. This model can apply to anything. And I would be very curious to know who, if anyone who relates to this, if anyone had experienced hearing things from someone firsthand and being impacted by it and learn from it. One, and two, if that had ever made any difference, if they ever turned a conflict into a beneficial situation which had interest, which has sort of benefits for both parties. So I would really be interested in hearing personal experience. So my big takeout is this is not about international relations. This is about human relations at any point.
Gotcha. And if you said, hey, remember this today as you go forward, what would you want us to remember? Make sure you always do this. Here's the one thing you must always do. Or
so sorry, just one moment. Can I just ask you practical? Are we in breakout rooms already?
No, we're here in the main thing,
okay.
and we're just sitting here chatting. So I'm talking, and we'll bring it back, and I might ask you a question, and you repeat some of this when everybody comes back. But I just wanted to kind of think, like, you've given us a lot of really good thoughts and perspectives and ideas. And you might say, hey, here's the one thing I want you all to make sure you are mindful of when you leave, because we can have more of these sessions, but there's maybe one thing that I would need to remember when I go out in the world.
Yeah. Okay, I would say never avoid conflict. If there is a conflict, see it as an opportunity and be grateful is what I would say. There's so much opportunity in conflicts, and learn, it's a big investment. Invest in how to resolve conflict is what I would say.
Gotcha. Great. And is there anything in terms of what you're going to be sharing next? Is there anything else that you want to make sure you share with everyone, or do you want to hear some questions now?
I think we're probably ready for questions or
yeah, that's perfect. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So people will be coming back
I'm also mindful of time as well.
Yep. People will be coming back. And so what we'll do is we'll do a little chatterfall in the questions, and then I'll ask a question when everybody's doing that. So welcome back, everybody. Thanks for coming back. It's good where everybody's coming back, and I'm sure.
And that's the meaning of life.
Yes, exactly. What's the meaning of life is that conflict is necessary. Life is conflict. If we are with others, it is that. The question is, which path do we go? Well-handled or not so well-handled? So I think that's what I'm taking away. So what I'd like you to do is, in your groups, you had questions. So could everybody go ahead and just put what was the question or two that came up for you? My question for you, Yeshim, is what is, going back to what we talked about, what is that one thing you want people to make sure they always do when they enter into a conflict? What's the one thing that you want to make sure that they do?
To be very, very grateful that there is a conflict, because conflict, for me, conflict is opportunity. Conflict is a potential. So it's lifelong investment. I mean, I think if anyone's I say that to my daughter, I say that to my colleagues, if anyone's gonna invest in something, invest in dialogue skills and just see conflict as an opportunity.
Great. And thank you. And so if you have any questions, put them in, because we are moving into the direction of wrapping up and going to move into some of the questions you all may have. So what questions came up in your group? Anything percolate up in your breakout groups as a question? So please type into the chat. One of the things that Yeshim and I were talking about the other day is that if you all take and you write, and I want to do a little section in Jabs on their practitioner corner on this with Yeshim in a few weeks, which is what I took away from listening to you. I love visuals. So if I drew a diagram and it's a kind of a range, on the right-hand side, I'd write the word innovation. On the left-hand side, I'd write destruction. Underneath innovation, I'd write hope and healing, right? Under the destruction side, I'd write pain and hurt, and and conflict is in the center, and there's this tension of how we move in the direction of this as conflict, how we can move in the direction of innovation and hope and healing, or we can move in this direction of conflict. We can move in the direction of conflict can take the form of destruction and pain and hurt, okay, damage, if you will. So could you speak a little bit to that, and then we'll look at some questions as well. But what are your, as we talked about that the other day, what are your thoughts on that as a visual?
I don't think that any creative. Okay, I'll talk about myself. I don't learn when things are going really well. I don't invent anything when things are going really well. I'm much more creative when there is an issue. So most beautiful products we see in the markets are always to soothe a pain somewhere. Conflict, we call it conflict. We can call it confusion. We can call it disagreement. But when it is seen as a conflict and confusion or whatever that we call it, it has so much potential. And we talked about the potential for good dialogue and beneficial opportunities, deepening relationships, etc. But as you say, it can also lead to creativity. It can lead to innovation, and I also would say that it takes us out of our comfort zone. It helps us think about out of our own box.
Right. So I think of it as kind of like it's feeling alive. To really feel alive and to feel all and be able to experience all of me, in that moment. It's just how I think what you're describing is how we think about it, how we work with it, and the tools. I always think of the martial arts versus street fighting. I think of there's techniques and there's tools for doing this, and if you use the techniques and tools, it can work well, and they will help, as opposed to learning all from a blank slate how to do it. Right?
Beautiful.
I think, yeah. So could you talk a little bit about what you talked about in terms of what I heard you talk about families, and talk about it's not just for countries, it's for organizations, and it's also and families. And you spoke about your daughter, even how this has helped you with your daughter and your relationship. Can you talk a little bit about how this applies in other settings?
Well, this study, I changed careers, as I mentioned, about 15 years ago to do this, and it actually changed my life. My daughter said to me the other day, she said to me that sometimes she, her teachers or other people around her tells things, and she says, I just want to go and have a big nap because they're advising me what to do. And she says, I just feel really sleepy when somebody gives me an advice. Of course, she's 16, and of course she'll say that. I know that. But then she said to me, but what you just said, because we were having a conversation, what you just said to me is interesting. She said, I just want to know more. And what actually, the reason why she said that to me was because I wasn't giving her instructions, but I was actually telling my own experience. She was saying, I find relationship with this and this person very difficult. And rather than me saying, no, don't do this, do that, and do this, I said, oh, actually, I had a situation like that. I hear that you're finding this difficult. I had a situation like that many years ago, or I know someone who had a situation, and this is what happened to them. That's how they failed, or that's how they succeeded. So that is about engaging other people. And I would say also, just a caveat there's that it's not always success stories. People love hearing failure stories. That's the other thing. That when we do a lot of the work, the generous people who come and help, I mean, this, I'll just quickly share, and I'll tell you these experienced parties that we bring, who has been through it and came out of it with some success. Often they share their success stories, but sometimes failure stories are even more interesting. So it's okay. We can be generous with other people and say, this is how I failed. When someone's talking about their heartache, we can just share that. So anyway, you asked me about my daughter. It helped my relationship with my daughter. I mean, I'm not saying everything is perfect. I mean, life is full of a lot of difficulties. Of course there is, but I would say that is my gem. That is my inside of me. That's my biggest tool in life, is actually not escaping conflict. Sometimes it's really hard, very, very hard. Sleepless nights, of course. Anger, of course. But it's very helpful. Are there any questions? Yeah, sorry.
So if anybody has anything they want to ask from their groups, would anybody like to come in live? Sylvia, we're, with your work at the Servant Leadership, and we're coming to see you over there with our program. Sylvia, would you like to reflect on anything you heard or ask a question in the moment? You'd have to unmute to do that.
Yes, I think that, well, first of all, I enjoyed very much the conversation of today, and also that we are in such an international group, and many conflicts are also international. So I think the cross-cultural dimension is very important in conflicts nowadays, to understand the other and to really try to listen, not only listen, but active listening. So with empathy of where is the other coming from. There are some great role models. Yeshim already mentioned Dr. Martin Luther King and Mahatma Gandhi, role models. There are many of them in the past, and we can learn a lot from them, how to reconcile. And well, the students who were in Amsterdam, and also the students who will come from cohort 2, they also will learn from practice what it means to reconcile dilemmas. And there is a certain practice and a theory developed by Professor von Strompenaars, and you will meet him. He will run a full day with the group on learning to apply dilemma reconciliation. And yeah, I can send a link right away. And well, Steve also knows about dilemma reconciliation.
That's great. Well, thank you.
Amazing. Thank you. It's very nice to meet you, albeit on Zoom. But yes, thank you. I look forward to that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, so as we wrap up and say goodbye, a gift to Yeshim. 2, 1, I'd like to take 5 seconds, and for all of us in our own way, to give her blessing and prayer and support and energy on her journey tomorrow, and for her to be successful and have a healthy return. And second, in the chat, if you could, just type a parting word of what's your takeaway. What do you appreciate that Yeshim shared today? What's the one thing that you appreciate? It's a little way of giving her a thank you. So I'm grateful for the simplicity of what you shared and some of the essence. I think there's some real wisdom in what you shared, and it's accessible. I understood it. I see it. Yes, there's work. You can't just do it over. You can't see it and then run, but at least I know from like, what are the ingredients, the things to do, some things to make sure I do. And that will help me as I go in the future. So I'm really grateful for what you shared and the characteristics of healthy handling of conflict and the resources that you provided.
Thank you, Steve. It's an absolute pleasure. And I just wanted to say, I'm just pressing the button now with my email in there. Please, if anyone wants to connect, I'll be very happy. But it's a real pleasure to and amazing. We couldn't actually look at all the chats, but I can see so many interesting things. I wonder whether I could actually take a copy, whether I could study.
Yeah, we'll
some-
get that for you. Yep. Anybody.
Hey,
And you
great.
will all
we'll get
receive,
everything for you.
you will all receive an email from us with follow-up, including the session recording and some of the resources that were shared in the chat.
Amazing, amazing. Because some people wrote very interesting things. We didn't time to look at it, but thank you all. I'm very, very grateful to be here.
And thanks everybody for coming today. I'm really grateful for all of you being here. So have a great rest of your day, and I'll see you soon. Bye for now.